Joining us this week on the London Theatre Review is Paapa Essiedu, who's appearing in All My Sons in the West End for director Ivo van Hove. Paapa, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing? How's it going?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. We're halfway through our preview bit of the run, which is both like my favourite and least favourite part. You know, that's the bit where I always feel like by the time you get to the end of the rehearsal room / tech rehearsal, you're probably only like 40% of where you're going to be by the time it's really, really cooking.
Yeah.
And like the idea is you start making quantum leaps once you get into the preview process, which fortunately is what seems to be happening right now at least.
For those who don't know it, could you sum up the play and your part within it?
Okay, so All My Sons is a play written by Arthur Miller in the mid kind of 1940s. I think it's 1947, but don't quote me on that. It's his first big hit, you know. That's where he made his name. And yeah, it's a play about a family called the Kellers, which have, I suppose, been both like characterized and decimated by war, World War II. The matriarch and the patriarch called Joe and Kate, and there were two sons called Larry and Chris, who I play. We both went to war. Larry didn't come back, or has not come back yet. And
he's missing, presumed dead, isn't he?
He's missing in action, presumed dead by some,
yes,
but not by specifically our mum, who's still holding on. Hope that he's going to come back. But yeah, I suppose the context of the play is about Joe, who during the war was a manufacturer of parts that go into P-40 planes, weapons basically, and made a lot of money doing that, and has now kind of moved into a more domestic factory setting, making washing machines or whatever. But his legacy is during the war, he was accused and then acquitted of selling 40 parts to the army, which led to 21 planes going down and young men dying. He's always denied it. Chris has always believed him. But the play kind of opens up when our previous next door neighbours, who are called the Divas, their son George comes back and says that he's spoken to his dad and it is true what's happened. And then the kind of drama kind of comes out of that. But it's a play that kind of examines family, loyalty, capitalism, what you will do to protect and secure the legacy of your children, and like what the lengths that you'll go for that.
Yeah. As we said, it's Ivo van Hove directing, one of the sort of hottest directors around. You're in an astonishing cast, yourself included, with Bryan Cranston, Marianne Jean-Baptiste and Hayley. What was the attraction for you? Was it the play? Was it working with the director? Was it working with the rest of the gang?
Yeah, it really was a combination of all of the things we've just said. It is one of my favourite plays. I saw the play for the first time when I was in drama school, I think in 2012. There's a production in the West End starring David Suchet, Zoe Wanamaker, Stephen Campbell-Moore, Jemima Rupa. And this was at a point in my life when I don't think I'd ever seen an American play, let alone a Miller play.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything about A View from a Bridge or Death of a Salesman, anything like that. I just saw this play and just found it so powerful, captivating, moving, and just large, you know. And since then, I've seen it like many times. I saw it at the Old Vic. I've actually even seen it in Catalan in Barcelona. It's a play that has been...
The Old Vic production was amazing, wasn't it?
It was great, yeah. But it's a play that's reoccurred in my life a lot. And I feel it has a robustness that really lends itself to being reimagined. And that's kind of my feeling around revivals, you know? Like, I feel like sometimes revivals are brilliant to do because there's a way of re-examining them and putting a new lens on them that allows them to speak to a contemporary audience, or speak to myself at least, in a way that like brings up something that feels real, present, new. And sometimes that doesn't happen, but I feel like a play like this has got the scope and the robustness to be able to do that. So I was really excited by that. Obviously, Ivo, I saw View from a Bridge maybe a couple of years after All My Sons, blew me away. And since then, saw Network and Opening Night, and I think he's in A Little Life. I think he's a director like no other in terms of his vision. And I was just like curious as to what it'd be like to work with someone like him. And then, of course, like Bryan needs no introduction, and his work needs no further praise, and Marianne already has become someone who's very close to me. Hayley I've worked with like several times before, or actually I've worked with once before, but worked in tandem with like several times before. And Tom Glynn-Carney I've always been an admirer of. So it really has been like the most perfect coming together of all the different strands that hopefully make a great production.
Yes, yeah. We met years ago when you were doing your Hamlet for the RSC, and back then you seemed like very much a sort of creature of the theatre, and you even had that wonderful backstory of having, been the understudy who got to go on and, was lauded with praise for that. Since then, I mean, you have regularly returned to the stage, doing The Effect with Jamie Lloyd at the National and so on. But, there's obviously been massive success with I May Destroy You, with Gangs of London. I mean, do you like to sort of chop and change between media now, or do you feel the need to come back to do plays?
Yeah, I'll always come back to do plays, because not just because I think that's where my love for acting was born, on stage, and learning about the craft of acting, both like with an audience and with other players, like especially like you say towards the beginning of my career, like I was just doing plays and I spent so much of my time just watching people, like you talk about that understudy story, doing that play King Lear, and everyone talks about that bit, but that was really only like 2 days of like a 6-month run. And for the rest of the 6 months I spent it watching Simon Russell Beale, Adrian Scarborough, Tom Brooke, Kate Fleetwood, Anna Maxwell Martin, like Stanley Townsend, these titans of British theatre, and watching them and learning from them, and just like it was the most remarkable education, the most remarkable playground to be able to start like figuring out what my creative voice was. So I'll always come back to the theatre, and I guess I've also got to acknowledge I'm really lucky to be given opportunities in both mediums, because not everyone does.
Yes, I know you can't say too much about it, but you are going to be playing Severus Snape in the Harry Potter reboot. I mean, what's the sort of sense of responsibility in taking on the mantle of that character?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's a huge sense of responsibility, because it's such a beloved story to literally billions, I would say, probably. And for me personally, like it was a really formative book for me as a child. I used to. My mum used to make my dinner, and I would read this book, and the dinner would go cold because I was like so engrossed in the story and in the world and in the characters. So it's something that's really important for me to be able to see if I can play a part in recreating that level of fantasy and imaginative joy for a new audience. Right.
Is it a different sort of order of experience being caught up in something that massive as, the Harry Potter world?
I guess time will tell, like I said to you just earlier on, I'm still pretty early on in the process, and it hasn't come out yet, and so on and so forth. I think there's many more chapters to that particular story, but at least at this point, I'm approaching it in the same way as I approach any of the characters that I do, which is to like try and see it in isolation, see him as a man that exists on his own terms, and like try and find nuance and dimension.
Right. There's 2 questions we like to ask all our interviewees on the London Theatre Review. One is, what's the best performance you've ever seen on stage? And the other one, this is to give you time to think about it, is what's the worst or most embarrassing or funniest thing that's ever happened to you on stage?
Oh, God. Well, I'll tell you what, like, I did, this might not be the worst thing that's ever happened to me, but it was awful at the time. I did a play called Death of England last year at the Soho Place. And it's a one-man show, or one-person show, and it's an hour and 50, I think. I think it's like 100 minutes, something like that. And I remember particularly remember the second preview, because I remember doing the first preview of that show, and there's something for me, at least as an actor, whenever I've looked at people doing one person shows, I've just been like, that's impossible, it can't be done. Like, how can you like do it without like your other people to cue you or help you or whatever? I did the first preview and smashed it, I thought. And I was like, this is easy, this is fine. Do you know what I mean? No problems. And then I went into the second preview, and about like 10 seconds before I walked on stage, a little voice in my head said, you don't know the lines for this. And any actor just like knows that is the last thing you want to hear when you just walk on stage in your own head.
Yeah.
So I started the show, and I had that experience where the lines were coming to me just like 10 milliseconds too late, basically. So it kind of had this feeling of being on a treadmill that's just a little bit too fast for you, you know.
Horrible.
So you're kind of like, "Ugh." Anyway, there was this, and it's an active show, and I'm coming off stage and talking to the audience and blah blah blah. This one bit where I did like a bit of audience participation with someone who I thought looked like a famous musician, and then they like blanked me, and then it turned out they weren't a famous. Anyway, the worst bit was I got so like in my head that there's one bit where I'm meant to run off on one side of the theatre and come on the opposite side. I ran off in the wrong exit, and because the Soho Theatre, shout out Nika Burns, is this beautiful brand new theatre, it's one of those theatres where if you go off in the wrong bit, you need a key card to get out and to get back in. So I got locked into a vestibule.
Yikes.
This is mid-show. This is like maybe an hour into the show. It's already going like biblically badly, and I just want it to end. And then I'm stuck essentially in like a coffin, like mid-show. I'm banging on the door, screaming for someone to like, let me out. Eventually one of the bar staff like kind of like toddles past and like lets me out into the bar. So I've then got to do a 270-degree run round to get to the bit that I'm meant to come on, and I come on the other wrong exit. So like the lights are on the opposite side of the theatre, so I've got to climb over the audience to get there. That was not my favourite moment of being an actor.
I think everybody in this room feels for you right at this moment. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I could try and think of a worse one than that, but that definitely sticks in my mind.
Yeah.